Daf Nun Gimel Amud Aleph, 13 lines from the top. Boimine Ravasi bar Nosim Rav Chia bar Ravashi Ma'u litin mardas al gabe chamor b'Shabbos. Is it mutter to put the saddle cloth on the chamor on Shabbos? Now previously we were discussing with the mardas, we were discussing if the animal is allowed to go out with it. It's allowed to go out to the Rishus HaRabim with that cloth. Is it considered something that is necessary for its protection, for its warmth? Is it considered a masoi, or is it considered something that is what's normally worn, a malbush? Over here, it's a different consideration over here. The question over here is, can you place the mardas on the animal on Shabbos where it's now in your Rishus, it's in your Chatzar? It's not about going into the Rishus HaRabim, it's in your Chatzar. The question is, can you put the mardas on the animal? So what is the issue? What is the shaila? So as Taisus explains, it's a shaila, is this considered tircha yisera? Is this considered excessive tircha for the benefit of the animal? This would be a derabbanan consideration, not an isur deraisa. But is this considered a tircha yisera? Are you now working, exerting yourself unnecessarily for the benefit of the animal? Amrle muter. He answered that it's muter. Well, what's the difference between this and a saddle? So apparently he held that the ukav, the saddle, would be also. Now, if this gives warmth, the saddle also gives some warmth. So what would be the difference? Why would the saddle be considered a tircha yisera and this not be considered tircha yisera? Ishtik, he was quiet, he didn't answer. So as it becomes apparent from the Gemara, he interpreted this lack of response to mean to say that he held that they were both the same, that there is no difference, that he held that an ukav is also muter. And based on that, he asked the kasha, ukav shal gabi chamor. If you have the saddle on the chamor, lo yitaltalena biyadai, you cannot remove it by hand. You cannot remove it from the animal. Ela moilicha u'mevia b'chatzar, you take it, lead it back and forth, and v'hu noifel me'elav, and it'll fall off on its own. You cannot remove it with the yadayim, but you can lead the animal back and forth in the chatzar, and with the intent that it'll fall off on its own. So now, what's the proof? Hashda lital amad loi. You cannot even remove it. Lahaniach miboya. Certainly, you can't put it on. If one can't even remove it, and that's considered tircha yisera, certainly one can't put it on the animal. So what's the difference between them? What's the chiluk? Rashi explains that there is a greater reason to aser putting it on the animal for a different reason. Because when, as we discussed previously, when one puts a saddle on the animal, it looks like he's going to take it, looks like he's going to take it out to use it for loading the animal, and which is an isser to load the animal, which is an isser of the deraisa. So therefore, there's a greater reason to aser putting the saddle on the animal, which looks like he wants to load the animal, more than removing it. Now, if removing it is aser, certainly putting it on is aser. Rav Zera said, no, you misunderstood. When he didn't answer, it's not because he holds that putting the uk of the saddle is mutter. He didn't answer, he holds, he's following the sheet of his Rabbi, Rav, he follows the sheet of his Rav, and Rav addressed only this case. So that was what he was quoting, and he didn't want to respond to mention something which his Rebbe did not mention. Omar Rav, he said, in the name of Rav, Tailin Traskol Behema B'Shabbos, you're allowed to put the feeding basket, attach it to the animal on Shabbos so that it can feed. And certainly you can put the merdas on. You can put the saddle cloth. You can even put the feeding bag and certainly a merdas. The feeding basket is only to make it easier for the animal. And there's no tsar if it doesn't have to have the feeding bag. If it bends down and eats, it's not a great tsar. It's a tanug to make it convenient and easy if it has a feeding bag so it doesn't have to bend its neck down. But it's not a tsar. So over there, you're telling me that it's mutter. By merdas, where it's cold and it has to keep warm, it has tsar from being cold. So really, he was just quoting his Rebbe Rav, and Rav only addressed merdas. So he did not want to comment on the ukaf. Not that he held necessarily that the ukaf would be mutter. He was just quoting and commenting only on what Rav mentioned. Shmuel amar mirdas mutter. But Shmuel, on this latter point, Shmuel argues with Rav. Shmuel says mirdas is mutter, it's mutter to put this out, but traskel is also. The traskel is also. It's a tanug, and he says it's also. Also, Rav Chia bar Yosef Ramal Shmai said the Rav coming to Shmuel. He mentioned what Rav said in the name of Shmuel that the traskel is mutter. Amalei Yachi Amar Abba Lo Yada B'Mili the Shamsa V'Lo Klum. He said if that's what Rav said, then he doesn't understand the Hilchos Shabbos. He said in the name of Yochanan, he said it's mutter to put the merdas on the chamor b'Shabbos. Amalei Yasher, he says that's correct. And Aryach and Bavel learned the same way. Aryach Manu, who is Aryach? It's Shmuel. Aryach means king. Shmuel is considered the king because by Dine Mominus, we paskin like him, and he was the one that's considered the expert on this. And just like a king can decide which money belongs to who, he has the powers of expropriation, etc. So to decide in Dine Mominus which money belongs to whom, he's called the king. Well, why does he say it? And just Shmuel holds like him. Rav Nami Amra. Rav also held that Amirdas is mutter, so why did he say specifically that it's Shmuel that holds that way? More answers. Elishamai Dahav Misayim Day, that in the Ein Tefillin Traskel B'Shabbos, he heard the end of the comment, where he concluded, he said, but a traskel is also. Now, Amarle, so he said that Amarle Yashiv V'chein Tergema Aryach B'Bavel. He said, that's correct, because the entire statement is only like Shmuel and not like Rav. That the Merdas is mutter, they both agree with. But that the traskel is also, it's only Shmuel, so that's why he said that this is correct, and Shmuel agrees with this psak. The Kuli Alma Mias Merdas is mutter. Everyone agrees that the saddlecloth, it's mutter. It's mutter to take it off, it's mutter to put it on. Ma'ishno me ukav. What's the difference between that and an ukav where we say you can't even remove it? And at this point we were assuming that it means on kol sheken you can't put it on, but you can't even remove it. What's the difference between the merdas and the ukav? The Gemara answers, shiny hasam the efshadun afam amela. The more answers that over here, the difference is because it can fall off on its own. It's not necessary. It's not necessary. That's that's in fact the loshon that it says in the Baraisa that you can lead it back and forth and it'll fall off on its own. So therefore, the reason that the ukav is also to remove it because it's not necessary. That would be considered tircha yasera. You can lead it back and forth; it'll fall off on its own. The merdas won't fall off on its own, so you have to be able to remove it. So Zok the Maram, lafi this reasoning only would apply to removing it. Therefore, there's no heter to remove the saddle, the ukav, because you have an eitzah without actually doing this tircha to lead it back and forth. But that svara, that reasoning doesn't apply to putting on the saddle. So there could be that, according to this teretz, that according to this chiluk, that taka putting the saddle on would be mutter, because obviously it's not going to happen on its own. So therefore, perhaps putting the saddle on would be mutter. It's only the removal of the ukaf which is also because it's not necessary, because you can lead it back and forth and it'll fall off on its own. Rapalpa gives a different teretz. In the case of the merdas, the purpose of putting it on is to warm the animal. And that is a very great benefit to the animal. If it doesn't have that warmth, it'll have tsar, because the and donkeys are chronically cold, so it needs to be warmed up. But the point of removing the ukav is to cool it down, is to have it cooler. And that is not such a necessity. The animal, the donkey, is cold, and if you don't warm it up, it has great tsar. So therefore, we allow, it's not considered tircha yaseir, we allow you to put the merdas on it because it gives it warmth. Letzanana lesle tsara. But for just the purpose of removing it so that it should cool down, that's not a necessity, because the animal doesn't have great tsar if it's not cooled down, because it's naturally in the state that it naturally is in, it's cold. The body temperature is colder. Clearly, that a donkey, even b'tkufas tammuz, even in the heat of the summer, it always feels cold. So to remove this saddle is not considered a necessity, because it doesn't have tsar if it's not going to be removed. So therefore, we don't allow you to remove it. To place the merdas on is considered a necessity, because the animal will have tsar if it is not warmed up. So according to this, it's davka to put the merdas as water. Now what about the ukav? Placing a saddle doesn't give it that much warmth anyway. So therefore, it's not considered to be a great benefit and necessity. The saddle cloth warms it up. It's allowed to therefore to put it on, but not putting on the ukav. Putting on the ukav is not considered a necessity. And removing the ukav is not considered a necessity, because that's only to cool it down, which is in any event not considered a tsar if it's not cooled down. So therefore, that's why it would be awesome. So according to this teretz of Rav Papa, the davka, the merdas, is mutter to put on, but not the ukav. Meisel asks you a kasha, you tell me, according to this Yisrael Rav Papa, it's only a tsar, to alleviate a tsar, that we're matter, but not for a talmud. Meisel asks you a kasha, lo yetzasus b'znav shul, that a horse is not to go out with a fox tail. They used to put a fox tail on the horse to ward off ayin hara. That is not considered a malbush for it, and therefore it's awesome. And also it can't go out, it can't go out with a red strip between its eyes. They used to do that for noy, to adorn the animal. Again, that's not considered a necessity and a malbush for the animal, so therefore it's considered a masoi. Hazav cannot go out with a pouch. He would wear a pouch to see if he had a re'iyah of ziva, but that's not considered an item of clothing. It's not considered an item of takshit, nor of physical protection, and therefore it's considered a masoi. It's considered caring. And and goats cannot go out with a pouch around their udders. They would tie pouches there to collect the milk, or to protect the udders from being scratched. So if it's to collect the milk, it's not considered an item of clothing. It's not for the protection of the animal. If it's to protect the udder, that would be considered an item of clothing. It's for the shmira of the animal. However, as Rashi mentions, the concern is he won't tie it tightly enough, and therefore we're afraid it might fall down. He might come to carry it. And not a para with a muzzle in its mouth. That's only to prevent it from grazing in other people's fields. It's a benefit for the humans. It's not a benefit for the animal. Therefore, it's considered a masoi. You can't go out with that. But and the young horses, the colts, cannot go out with the feed baskets that are tied to the mouths to go out to the Rishus Harabim. They can't go out with the traskel and with the feeding baskets to go out on the Rishus Harabim. And an animal cannot go out with a shoe. That's not considered a necessity for the animal. Not with an amulet, even if it was written by a mumche, even if it was barak menusa, that it does work, an animal is not allowed to go out with that. That's not considered an item of clothing for an animal. This is a churma, an animal over a person, because a person would be allowed to go in with an amulet, with kameya, if it is from a mumcha. But an animal is not. However, he is allowed to go out with a bandage on a wound that is considered a malbish for him, and splints on, if he has a broken bone, so that they could go out with a splint. They take two boards and put, for instance, if there's a broken leg, put it in the middle and secure it, and it would be something like a cast that is needed for the protection of the animal. That is mutter, that is considered to be a malvish for the animal. Ubeshilya Amud Yomi, and if it has the shilya, the placenta that's hanging, dangling, now even though it's partially out, but so long as it's not completely out, then we say that it's still considered part and parcel of the animal. It's not considered rather carrying something else. It's considered the animal himself, so it could go out. And if it has a bell around it, you have to stop it up so it doesn't clang, it doesn't ring, because that would be also as far as being moilid kol. So that would be also, so you have to stop off the bell. And even then, you're only allowed to go with it and lead it in your chatzar in the courtyard. But even then, you aren't allowed to take it out into the Rishus Harabim, and because it looks like you're taking it out for selling for the marketplace, for business, because that's the way they used to when they used to go to the market that way. So even then, even if you do stop it up, you cannot take it out to the Rishus Harabim. So, but why are we bringing this in? Because it says you cannot go out with the young horses, you cannot take them out with a troskelin, with a feeding basket. So that's also, which make a diuk, now here it says specifically l'reshus harabim, which is mashma that the isser involved over here, that the issue is because it's considered carrying. So it's l'reshus harabim ha b'chatzar shaper dami. But which implies that it would be in the chatzar where there's no problem with carrying, with a masui, that it would be mutter. This is only a tanug. This is only something which is for the tonic for the animal, and it's not to alleviate tsar. And you see, as far as the tircha yasera, it's not considered tircha yasera. So you see that it would be mutter. Are we not talking about that there are larger ones, larger colts, that it is not a tsar to have to bend down to graze, to feed, and it wouldn't cause great tsar if it didn't have a feeding basket, and nevertheless it's mutter in the chatzar. It's mutter in the chatzar. Doesn't that show you that just for even for the tana, for the pleasure of the animal, it's mutter to do the tircha? So isn't that a kasha on Rav Papa's Yisoid? Frektai says, what's the kasha? Here it says, maybe we're talking about where on the chatzar it's mutter, whether it was when it was attached from Erev Shabbos. Maybe that's why it's mutter. It says you're not allowed to go out with it with the feeding basket or Rishus Harabim. Meaning, even if it was attached to Erev Shabbos, it's also because it's a mosque. But in the chatzar, yes, make the dik, and the chatzar it's mutter. That's when it was attached to Erev Shabbos. So there's no tircha involved, and it's only in the chatzar, so it's mutter. But perhaps if to tie and attach it on Shabbos, it would be also even in the chatzar. Taisus answers no, because dafka in this case, as opposed to the other cases, here it says Rishus Harabim, which implies only Rishus Harabim, which implies that in the chatzar, in any event, it would always be mutter. Even if you would tie it on Shabbos, it would be mutter. So doesn't that show you that for a tanug it's mutter? Where says no, we're not talking about gedolim loy b'ketanim. It's talking about ketanim, which the ketanim, it would be a tsar because they have long legs, they have short necks, and it would be a tsar to have to bend down to feed. So for the ketanim, it is a tsar, and that's why we're matzah. But for gedolim and chanami, where it's not a tsar, only a tani would be also dik. And namidik tani, you can make a dik because it says dumya de kemeah mamino. It says in the same context as a kemeah. Now, what is the purpose of the kemeah? Is to alleviate a choili, a sickness. That's to alleviate tsar. So we're talking in the context of alleviating tsar. So therefore, that's what the troskel we're discussing, that type of a troskel where it's for young ones, where that's the purpose of it.